The next morning it was very dull and raining heavily. This was not the sort of weather we wanted in Jasper. Do you remember the map and the picture of the steam locomotive? Well, here she is, resting in honourable retirement, number 6015. Those mighty driving wheels no longer pounding their way up from Vancouver. Despite the weather, this was a scene that lifted steam enthusiasts' hearts. But for the rest of the day, it was back to the hotel and rest up. The next day's weather was a little better, and a trip up the cable car seemed to be the best bet. They called it the Jasper Tramway for some reason, or rather confusing. Despite the poor visibility, the views were pretty impressive. We were 7,450 feet up, and it was cold, only 5 degrees and very windy. With clouds slowly but surely obscuring the views, the best bet by far was to go inside to the warm cafe. On a clear sunny day, this could have looked stunning. As it was, as soon as the next cable car came up, it was not too difficult a decision to hop on it and go down.
Yeah, sure. It's a prime location.
Inside, there's a down. So he sees a puff of smoke, like a red sees a guy coming straight up towards him, and he yells.
Once through the cloud, you could see the town of Jasper way below. The cable car station soon came into view, and our thoughts began to turn to the late afternoon trip of going on a safari in Jasper National Park. We were in high hopes as we set off, as we were bound to see lots of bears. We had been told both grizzly and black ones. Our driver kept up a continuous commentary in a slow Canadian drawl. But after nearly 1 hour, we still had not seen a bear. And then we came across quite a few young elk, which was at least some wildlife. There were quite a few doing what young ones do anywhere, just playing around.
Cute little guys, eh?
Yeah.
Oh, this one's right here close to us. It doesn't, it wonders what we're doing.
Come on.
Moving further on, some big males were spotted. And this was worth a much closer look.
Now, if you so choose, I will let you out of the bus here, but stay right.
Look out. Only joking, but we did move quickly back into that bus.
It becomes extremely irritating to them. So what they do is they look for trees like this size or bushes to rub up against, because they're going to be loaded up with hormones and they become extremely aggressive. And they have been known to punch these.
Our last look at another solitary elk.
Get his backside now, look.
Always.
A long-legged animal,
Now, oh, there you go. He's posing. Tick or two off him.
We were about to move off, but then a bird came and sat on his back.
trying to get it off.
Come on then, what is it?
It's a bird.
Did you get some pictures? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Kind of neat, that bird on his back, eh?
It's a sparrow.
Driving back, we we were all rather disappointed about not having seen any bears. However, back in the hotel, I knew where to find one. He may not be real, but at least it was the nearest we had come to one. The next day, we were off again into Jasper National Park, and thankfully the weather improved. This is the Athabasca River in a typical setting of Canada. The river hurries along through spectacular country until it comes to the Malign Canyon, a narrow defile in the rocks. Here it plunges down out of sight to emerge further on. We moved on to the main attraction, which is surrounded by the Rockies. On the way there, we encountered a wedding party. The happy couple.
They're following you. Look.
They're still coming. Wonderful, wonderful.
Oh yeah, this is the spot right here.
Yeah. This will hit the movie cinemas in a couple of hours' time.
Then the group photo with a lake as background. And what a background. This is Malign Lake, the largest glacier-fed lake in the Rockies. Although the skies were not clear, when the sun did shine on the mountaintops, it was pretty stunning. The lake surface, in parts, gave a mirror image of some of the peaks. This was one of Canada's main attractions, and visitors were well catered for. We hadn't seen any real mountains on the trip, so had to make do with a cardboard cutout. The well-appointed cafe was doing brisk business, watched over by another Mountie. Visitors flocked to this point from all over the world, and it's easy to see why.
You can probably, I think we're going to take, you probably can just set it down.
A close-up of the peaks show how formidable they are. There are plenty of pleasure launches at the quayside. Or you can just paddle your own canoe. We took a last look at this wonderful scene and made ready to move on, but we still hadn't seen any bears. Dark mutterings were heard, and then we saw a bear at long last, a small black bear right by the side of the road. Cameras clicked and relief all round. Tick the box, we had seen our bear. We all relaxed and thoughts turned to our next destination, Churchill, right up there on the Hudson Bay. We were, however, in for a bit of a shock. This was Churchill's main street. We all wondered what on earth we had come to. Spirits sank lower when we saw our hotel, the Tundra Inn. I set off to explore this gloomy place and to locate a restaurant. The hotel did not have one. This was the Polar Bear Information Centre, and the little boat was a good attraction for Gypsy's Cafe cum restaurant. Well, it would have to do for tonight. The next day was lovely and sunny, and we were to go whale watching again. After some safety tips and a look at our boat, we prepared to get aboard. The gloom of yesterday had gone. We hoped to see some beluga whales today, and soon we were speeding out into the Hudson Bay. It wasn't long before we spotted some. Being an experienced whale watcher, well, I'd done it once before. I was ready.
look at them, they're right here.
But then word came through that polar bears had been seen. Did we want to see them? A loud chorus of yes please rang out, and we were off. We slowed to a stop about 100 yards offshore. Filming at that distance wasn't easy. There were 2 big polar bears on the shore prowling around, and 2 in the water. A mother and her cub. She was not only keeping cool, but keeping the cub away from the big males. It looked as if this one was contemplating going in, but no, changed its mind at the last moment. Then he thinks again and has a real close look.
Sorry. Well, Malcolm says he'll email missing photos.
The cub was obviously getting anxious. We could see him climb up Mum's back.
It is.
The standoff continues as we watch this little drama unfold.
Shoot, shoot, shoot.
I'm sorry.
You know.
Yeah, no, I just like the combination of different stuff.
He's thinking about it yet again.
I'm so fed up of human beings.
Yeah, they're like, get out of here.
But it appears a truce has been agreed, and we decided to leave them to it. Having seen the bears, we set off to visit an old fort, and on the way we saw a few more beluga whales.
Yeah, I'd like to train them.
Three or four of them. Look.
Look at them right here.
Yeah. Right under the bow.
It wasn't long before we got our first sight of the fort on the shoreline. A security guard with a rifle led the way. This is the Prince of Wales Fort, built in 1733 to protect the Hudson Bay Company from pirates and marauders.
I'm gonna get you out of the job.
A plaque on the wall covers its history. As we go through the narrow entrance, watch out for our armed guard on the wall, right-hand side. This is polar bear territory, and we could not take any chances.
Probably the Karen Iron Works, or yeah.
The cannons are original, shipped out from England for the fort, and have the royal coat of arms and size cast on them. This one's a 32-pounder. It must have been bleak here in wintertime. Leaving the fort, we rejoined our boat and returned to Churchill. It was time for some lunch. Our hotel, by the way, had turned out to be friendly and very comfortable. The next day was a free day, and I took a look at Churchill's railway station. Built in 1920, it is now a listed building. On the railway side, it doesn't look as if it gets much use. In the left side of the station is the Inuit Museum. The first thing you see is a snow-covered bank with a hole. Inside the hole is a hibernating polar bear and her cub. You can almost hear them breathing. They're big fellows, aren't they? Here's a complete Inuit dwelling. With some snowshoes kept outside, of course. And all the things needed for the happy home, including a baby carrying device. There were some very realistic tableaus, including birds, Arctic foxes, and the Prince of Wales fort, showing in great detail how things were in days gone by, when you had to be completely self-supporting. And in a small lecture theatre, a film was giving some useful tips.
Do not. First, a curious bear may approach simply to see what you are, or circle downwind to pick up your scent. If a bear appears interested in you, it's time to change your strategy. It needs to know you're a person, not a prey item. Help it.
I must remember all that. The next day, we set off yet again to look for whales, this time in a Zodiac rubber boat.
So hopefully you'll show us some polar bears.
Racing across the Hudson Bay, we hope to see them. We began to see one or two.
It's not a bear.
It's too square.
And then nearly 6 of them, but they were slowly moving away from us.
Copy that. Do you see any bears?
Then we heard that more bears had been spotted. So off we went. We moved in very slowly. This time we could get much closer to the shore, and there was possibly a mother and her cub, perhaps the same ones we had seen earlier.
Oh, it's great. Coming quite fast, aren't they?
But today we wanted to see whales and set off again to find them. This time we were lucky. The whales were right close to the boat.
Right underneath.
Wow, look at that, eh?
They're turning round. They're turning out.
That's where the fish is.
The whales communicate acoustically, and a microphone beneath the boat picked up their sound.
Some noise, I haven't heard that one.
Right underneath, look. There he goes, right to the side. Right under here, look, 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 look.
Oh, yes.
He's stopped to have a look at us. Hi, guy. underneath. Look at that. It's just keeping station astern. You turn, he turns. Coming up for a blow.
They are.
To hear and see them that close was quite a thrill, and after a good morning's entertainment, we headed back to Churchill. After lunch, we collected our things, checked out of the Tantra Inn, and made for the station. It was time to board the sleeper train service to Winnipeg. The train, not as long as the Canadian, has similar coaches, but no observation dome cars. This journey would take us due south through the prairie lands on a 900-mile trip. Every time the train approached a road or path, the driver had to sound the loco's powerful air horns. Huge grain silos were a frequent sight, and the scenery changed little for mile after mile. Soon the all-important dinner time arrived. The dining car decor is very similar to the Canadians, and the food was very welcome. The next day the scenery was very similar, some rolled up bales of change. Canada is the world's top producer of canola or rapeseed, used for making biodiesel fuel, animal feed and vegetable oil, and we passed field after field of it for miles. We made a stop at Dauphin to refuel, and we got out and stretched our legs.
We're doing some stick handling here because I had to get a head down.
An old caribou wagon looked rather lonely sitting there. Setting off again, a few cattle relieved the never-ending fields of rapeseed. As we were due to arrive in Winnipeg, early evening, a late lunch was served.
And he used to make those transactions to ship by
This was the last meal we would have on a train, so we tucked in. After lunch, I took some film of the kitchen car. It's an original 1955 car made, like all the cars or carriages, by the Budd Company of America, who supplied cars to all the railroad companies. Made from stainless steel, they were virtually indestructible and are still giving good service. I wonder how many meals have been prepared in here. A few hours later, we began to run into Winnipeg and arrived on time. This holiday had been with the Great Railway Journeys Company, and we sure had covered some miles in trains this trip. The company prides itself on taking their customers on train journeys in every country in the world. The next day, I took a look around this, the capital city of Manitoba. Modern glass-fronted buildings contrasted to St. Mary's Cathedral, built in 1881. I'd hate to be the window cleaner for this one. This is the legislative building built in 1920, and where a statue of Queen Victoria proudly surveys her overseas domain. I found it a very attractive city, but the temperature can plummet to minus 40 degrees in winter. Being a railway holiday, where better to finish the trip than at Winnipeg's impressive Union Station. It was built in 1911 and designed by the same architects, Warren and Wetmore, who designed New York's Grand Central Station. This must be one of the most beautiful domed station ceilings anywhere in the world. There were some impressive photos of the Canadian winding its way through the Rockies, with the domed observation car bringing up the rear. The Winnipeg Railway Museum, all part of the station, was a must. There were lots of models and some odd creations, plus photos of the days of steam. An old Model T Ford type delivery van, and a caraboose, once a familiar sight on freight trains, which were all discontinued in the 1980s. A model railway, unfinished but operational, will look very impressive in time. But the prize exhibit is undoubtedly this wonderful old wood-burning locomotive. I've seen many of these in Western films, and it was great to see a real one for the very first time. Complete with bell and an enormous spark-arresting chimney, it was quite a sight. Built by the Baldwin Locomotive Company in 1872, it was Canadian Pacific Railroad's locomotive number 1. With a tender full of real logs, number 1 looked as if it could steam away at any time. But time waits for no man. With the holiday at an end, it was time to go and catch the flight to London. We'd had a very interesting trip and a wonderful ride on the Canadian. Hope you enjoyed the film.